That night, the gray envelope lay still on the doormat like a beast that knew exactly who to wait for. When I pulled the letter free, my grandfather's slanted script changed the air in the room. My aunt pressed her lips together. That's discipline. But I understood. Some blows don't need to touch skin to leave the deepest bruise. My name is Jasmine Kane. I am 34 years old, and I am a financial investigator. The High Plains Integrity Court was not built for comfort. It was built for weight. The room was a cavern of old oak, dark panels rising 2 stories to a coffered ceiling, brass fittings, polished to a dull gleam, reflected the cold morning light. The air was heavy, smelling of floor wax, old paper, and the faint, acidic tang of collective anxiety. Every cough, every shuffle of paper, every whisper from the gallery echoed. And the gallery was packed. They called themselves journalists, but they were vultures in better suits, crammed into the benches, notebooks and recorders held aloft. Their whispers were a low-grade fever in the room. A background static fixated on 2 things, the Kane name and the disputed Kane Urban Fund. They smelled money and dysfunction, the press's favorite cocktail. They were here for a show, and my family had never disappointed. Then there was her, front row, center, Aunt Ruth. Her posture was immaculate, a testament to a lifetime of rigid control. She wore a silk blouse the color of expensive cream, and her smile was precisely measured. It was a public smile, calibrated for jurors and cameras. It didn't reach her eyes. It never did. That smile was a tool, a placeholder for warmth while her mind calculated angles and leverage. Seeing it, I felt the old echo, the phantom pressure of her favorite phrase, a line she had used as a hammer throughout my adolescence. That's discipline. It was the sentence she passed down whenever my spirit pushed back, whenever I questioned the suffocating narrative of our family. It was the gaslight before I knew the word. It was the justification for my stepmother's calculated cruelties, the neat, tidy bow she tied around emotional starvation and relentless control. It was the word that meant silence. Beside her, my stepmother, Lydia, sat with a curated stillness, her hands folded over an expensive leather portfolio. She looked like a victim of circumstance, a role she had perfected over 2 decades. Her expression one of weary patience. She was the long-suffering wife, the peacemaker, forced into this vulgar public arena by an ungrateful stepdaughter. The performance was flawless. And next to her, my father, Patrick Kane, a name that meant something in the Front Range, a name synonymous with real estate, foundations, development, legacy. To me, his name meant a strategic absence, a lifetime of chosen silence. He stared straight ahead at the judge's bench, his profile firm, his jaw set. He was present, as always, in body, but allied in his inaction. He had made his choice long ago, and he was sitting right next to it. I adjusted the cuff of my own blazer, the simple navy wool a stark contrast to their expensive, mournful attire. On my left sat Avery Sloan. Sloan was all sharp angles and focused energy, a federal prosecutor whose reputation for dismantling complex financial structures preceded them. The portfolio in front of Sloan was not leather-bound. It was a battered government-issue accordion file, bulging with facts, figures, and timelines. Sloan represented the Rocky Mountains Special Integrity Bureau, the RMSIB. They represented an outside force, an objective system, a variable my family had not anticipated. Sloan was quiet, their breathing even, a mirror of the calm I was fighting to project. The weight of the gallery's gaze was physical. I could feel it on my back, on my face. I was being tried by 100 eyes before the first word was spoken. They saw the prodigal daughter, the troublemaker, the unstable, ungrateful heir airing the family's dirty laundry for a paycheck. They saw the narrative Lydia and Ruth had spent years carefully, skillfully weaving. I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest, the adolescent urge to shout, to defend, to react, the instinct to point and say, "You don't know what they did. You don't know what it was like." I shut it down. I focused on my breath. Inhale, count to 4. Hold, count to 4. Exhale, count to 6. This was not a family dinner. This was not a screaming match in a carpeted hallway. This was a public hearing. I was a financial investigator, and I was here to present a case, not a trauma. My breath was my anchor. My facts were my shield. The judge, a woman with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun, scanned her monitor. The room held its breath. The opposing counsel, a sleek man from a downtown firm whose retainer probably cost more than my first condo, looked confident, almost bored. After reviewing the preliminary motions, the judge's voice cut through the silence, sharp and final. This court will permit the introduction of new evidence pertaining to the last will and testament of Victor Kane. A ripple went through the gallery. The sleek lawyer's smile faltered. Just for a second, a crack in the expensive veneer. I saw him lean over to whisper to my father. Patrick didn't flinch, but his hand, resting on the polished table, curled slowly into a fist. I looked at Ruth. Her measured, public smile was gone. It was replaced by a look of such profound, cold fury that it was almost a relief. The mask had slipped. This was the real Ruth, the one I knew. Victor Kane. My grandfather. The name opened a door in my mind. Just a crack. And a memory flooded in. Quick and sharp, a flash of the dark wood of the formal dining room, the suffocating weight of the damask tablecloth, the clink of heavy silverware, the scent of roast beef and old port. I was 15. My cousin, Cole, was holding court at the other end of the table, his voice booming as he recounted some minor, muddy football victory, laughter, applause. My father clapped him on the back. Lydia smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. Aunt Ruth proposed a toast to the future of the Kane line. Earlier that day, I had received a letter confirming I had won a statewide mathematics competition, a scholarship attached. I had waited for a pause in the conversation, and when I mentioned it, my voice small in the cavernous room, Lydia had sighed. "Jasmine, please," she'd said, not looking at me. "Don't dominate the conversation." Aunt Ruth had added, her voice laced with that familiar, disappointed tone. "A little humility is a virtue. Dear, we all know you're clever. There's no need to boast. That's discipline." Cole got a standing ovation for scoring a touchdown. I got silence and a lesson in humility. I closed the door on the memory, pushing it back down. I had made a promise to myself when I filed the first motion with the RMSIB. This case would not be about any of that. The world did not need to hear the details of the psychological warfare, the constant, draining erosion of self. There would be no testimony about slammed doors, about weeks of strategic silence, about the relentless othering in my own home. I would not speak of the verbal manipulations, the gaslighting, the endless, dizzying loop of being told my reality was wrong, that my memories were flawed, that my feelings were an overreaction. That was my story, but it was not my evidence. My evidence was cleaner. It was numbers on a page. It was forged signatures on a wire transfer. It was shell corporations with Denver post office boxes. It was the cold, hard, beautiful math of theft. I was a financial investigator, and I was here to show them, and the world, exactly where the money went. I was here to prove that the only discipline they ever practiced was the rigid, systematic discipline of their own greed. I met Avery's gaze. Sloane gave a single, imperceptible nod. The battle had begun. It was a Tuesday, 1 week before the hearing, that the first crack appeared in their foundation. I had come home late from a strategy session with Avery, my mind a grid of spreadsheets and wire transfer dates. My apartment, small but mine, was the one place the Kane name meant nothing. It was my sanctuary, high above the Denver streets, all clean lines and cool glass. And there, on the doormat, was the gray envelope. It was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. It wasn't shoved in the mail slot. It was placed, perfectly centered. It was heavy, a thick cardstock that spoke of expensive stationery, and it had no stamp, no postmark, no address. Someone had been here. Someone had stood right outside my door, knew my unit number, and placed it there by hand. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. I checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. I listened. Nothing but the distant hum of the elevator. I nudged it with my foot. It was thick. I locked the deadbolt behind me, carried the envelope to the kitchen island, and looked at it under the bright track lighting. My name, Jasmine, was written on the front. Just my name, no last name. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was impossible. My breath caught. It was the hand of a dead man. It was my grandfather, Victor Kane. I would know it anywhere. The aggressive slant, the precise, almost architectural loops. I grabbed a letter opener, my hand shaking, and slit the top. Inside were 3 folded pieces of the same heavy cream-colored paper. The first was a letter. "My dearest Jasmine," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I have failed you in person, and for that, I am truly sorry. It means the ones I trusted have proven false. It means they did exactly what I feared they would." I had to sit down. The air had gone thin. His handwriting was a physical presence in the room, a voice from a grave that had been silent for 6 years. I traced the ink of his signature. Victor. The pressure was right, heavy on the V, trailing off at the end. The second document was folded neatly beneath it. I unfolded it, my pulse thrumming in my ears. The heading was stark: Last Will and Testament of Victor Kane. My eyes scanned the legal boilerplate until they hit the date. March 4th, 2007. This was years before his final illness. Years before Lydia had taken over his schedule. Before Ruth had become the gatekeeper for all his official business. Years before the will they read at the probate hearing, the one that had established the Kane Urban Fund and given joint control to my father and Aunt Ruth, with Lydia as a lifetime beneficiary. The will that had left me a token, insulting educational trust that I had refused. I read the executor clause, my name. I read the primary beneficiary clause, my name. I bequeath the entirety of my estate, including all properties, liquid assets, and controlling interest in Kane Holdings, to my granddaughter, Jasmine Kane. I read it again, and again. I felt a wave of vertigo, as if the floor had dropped away. He hadn't cut me out. He hadn't believed their stories. He had left me everything. My investigator's mind, the part of me that was cold and analytical, snapped into focus, pushing the tide of grief and shock aside. Why had this never surfaced? The date, 2007. My mind raced through Colorado probate law. It was the analog whole. In 2007, the state's electronic filing system for wills was still in its infancy, not yet mandatory. A will executed and notarized at a private firm could exist solely as a physical document. If one party presented a newer will, say one from 2012, signed when he was already medicated and vulnerable, and no one contested it with an older original document, the newer one would sail right through probate. They had buried this. They had produced a forgery, or a coerced document, and relied on the fact that no one knew this one existed. The third item was a small, torn slip of paper, like a note scribbled from a desk pad. The handwriting was the same, but more urgent. They won't find this, but you will. When the time is right, if you're reading this, check Canyon at dusk. Canyon at dusk. The words hit me like a physical blow. I knew it. Of course I knew it. It was a massive, brooding oil painting, a dark, atmospheric piece of the Black Canyon of the Gunnison. My grandfather loved it. It hung in his private study at the family estate, the room my father now used as his home office, the room I hadn't set foot in since the funeral. My first instinct was to call Avery. My second was to stop and think like an investigator. This was a document of unknown provenance. It was a ghost. Before I could use it, I had to prove it was real. I laid the will and the letter flat on my scanner. I put on a pair of nitrile gloves. This was evidence. I needed a verified signature, a control. I went to my fireproof safe in the closet and pulled out the hard file containing my old college incorporation documents. In 2005, My grandfather had helped me set up a small LLC for a tutoring business, a way to teach me about tax law. The incorporation papers had been filed with the state, and I had the original notarized documents, his signature clear and verified by a public stamp. I pulled up the scanned document from my safe and laid the new will beside it. I turned on my desk lamp, angling the light. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was not just a match, it was a perfect, flawless match. The micro details, the invisible ticks that define a person's hand, were all there. The distinctive way he slashed his number 7 with a sharp horizontal bar, the heavy initial pressure on the first letter of every line, a habit from using fountain pens, the way his lowercase a was always slightly open at the top. The K in Kane was identical, a strong vertical bar, with the upper and lower arms detached, flying from the center. I sat back, the air knocked out of me. It was real. This changed everything. My case with the RMSIB had been about financial malfeasance, about them siphoning money from the fund. This letter, this will, made it about something far bigger. This was probate fraud. This was forgery. This was the master key to the entire kingdom. I initiated my preservation protocol. This was what I was trained to do. First, I completed the high-resolution scans, capturing the texture of the paper, the bleed of the ink. I saved them as lossless TIFF files. Second, I created an encrypted container using AES 256. I placed the scans inside, along with a text file documenting the time and circumstances of discovery. Third, I established redundancy. I uploaded the encrypted container to a secure, zero-knowledge cloud server based in Switzerland. I copied it to a new, sterile USB drive, which I then placed in my safe. I moved the original scans onto an air-gapped external hard drive, disconnected from any network. 3 independent, secure points of storage. Only then did I pick up the phone and call Avery Sloan. "Avery," I said, my voice flatter and calmer than I felt. "It's Jasmine. We have a development, a significant one." I explained the envelope, the lack of postage, the letter, the will, the date, 2007. There was a long silence on the other end of the secure line. When Avery finally spoke, the casual tone was gone, replaced by the sharp focus of a federal prosecutor who smells blood. "Where are the documents right now?" "On my kitchen island. I have not touched them without gloves since the initial discovery. I've completed a full digital preservation protocol. Scans are encrypted and backed up in triplicate." "Good," Avery said. The word was clipped. "Do not touch them again. Do not let them out of your sight. This is potentially the pivot point for the entire case. This moves it from financial crimes to a conspiracy to defraud an estate. I need to establish a perfect forensic chain of custody. I'm dispatching an RMSIB forensic courier to you, now." "What are they looking for?" "Everything," Avery replied. "We're not just validating the signature. We'll run a full analysis. The paper stock. Can we date its manufacture? The ink. Is its chemical composition consistent with inks available in 2007? The aging. Is the slight yellowing of the paper natural oxidation, or was it artificially accelerated with heat?" I looked at the documents, now sealed in an archival polyethylene sleeve I'd pulled from my kit. My mind was already building the checklist, just as Avery's was. The paper type, the ink composition, the aging, the nester folds. Was the ink cracked along the creases, or did it soak in, indicating it was folded fresh? The adhesive on the envelope flap. Was there a DNA trace, however degraded? And the most important question of all, who delivered it? Who was the ghost that had walked up to my door? The courier arrived 30 minutes later, a silent woman in a federal windbreaker who documented and sealed the envelope and its contents into a secure forensic transport box. I closed the door and stood in my silent apartment. The envelope was gone, but it had left its imprint. It was a key, but a key that only turned halfway. My grandfather had given me the what, the will that proved his intent, but he had also given me the where, the clue that pointed to the rest of the story. Canyon at dusk. The second half of the key was hanging on a wall in my father's house, behind a painting of a dark, gaping hole in the earth, and I knew, with absolute chilling certainty, I had to go back and get it. My grandfather's clue, check Canyon at dusk, was a compass point, but the map, the emotional understanding of why a painting, why a hidden space, was locked in a memory. It was the memory of a broken vase, a punishment, and a photograph that hung in the upstairs hallway. It happened when I was 14. My cousin Cole, 2 years older and the designated heir to the family's charisma, was visiting. We were in the grand corridor that connected the main staircase to the library, a space my father insisted on calling the gallery because of the oversized, mediocre landscapes and stiff family portraits that lined the walls. Cole was, as usual, performing. He was tossing a heavy glass paperweight, a gift from some developer, up and down. "Cole, don't," I said, not even looking up from my book. "That's the Ming replica vase. Lydia will have a fit if you break it." "It's not Ming, it's a lamp base from a catalog," he sneered. But he was clumsy. He tossed it one more time, a stupid, arrogant flourish, and fumbled the catch. The crash was explosive. The paperweight hit the hardwood floor, bounced, and struck the vase. It was a large, gaudy thing of imitation celadon, but it was Lydia's favorite. It shattered into 100 jagged pieces. We both froze. The silence that followed was heavy, more total than the noise had been. Cole's face, usually so full of bluster, went pale. "Oh, man, she's going to kill me." "No," I said, my voice resigned. "She's going to kill me." Lydia appeared first, drawn by the sound. She glided into the hallway, her bare feet silent on the expensive runner. She did not look at Cole. She did not look at the shattered porcelain. She looked at me. Her gaze was cold, assessing, and already disappointed. "What did you do?" she asked. Her voice was perfectly level. "I didn't," I said. "Cole broke it. He was throwing the paperweight. Cole, sensing an escape route, immediately defaulted to the family script. It was an accident. I told Jasmine I was sorry." Lydia's focus remained locked on me. "And what did you say to him, Jasmine, before this happened?" I was confused. "I told him to stop, that he would break it." "I see." Lydia's lips thinned. "So you were lecturing him. You were being unpleasant. You created the tension, and this is the result." It was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of emotional jujitsu. In the space of 10 seconds, I had become responsible for the broken vase because I had warned him not to break it. "That's insane," I said, and my voice rose. "He broke it. He was being reckless." "Do not," she hissed. "Use that tone with me." That was when Aunt Ruth arrived, flanking her. If Lydia was the artist of insinuation, Ruth was the hammer of judgment. She surveyed the scene. Lydia, rigid with anger. Me, vibrating with injustice. Cole, looking suitably contrite. And the broken pottery. "What is this?" Ruth demanded. Lydia answered for me, her voice dripping with martyrdom. Jasmine was antagonizing her cousin. He had an accident, and she decided to make it a moral failing. She's shouting. I can't seem to make her understand polite behavior. I opened my mouth to protest, to scream that this was a lie, that the facts were being twisted into a pretzel, but Ruth held up a hand. "That is enough, Jasmine," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the air and pinned me to the wall. She turned to Cole, and her expression softened. "It's all right, darling. Go find your uncle. Tell him you were honest about what happened. He'll appreciate that. Honesty is what matters." Cole vanished, scrambling away to be rewarded for his confession. I was left alone with the two of them. Lydia sighed, a long-suffering sound. "She simply will not listen. She argues about everything." Ruth stepped closer. She looked down at me, her gaze heavy and absolute. I was 14, but I felt like I was 4. "You," she said, "are willful. You are disruptive. You enjoy conflict. Your stepmother gives you a stable, beautiful home, and you repay her with this noise, this constant opposition. It is exhausting. What you need, young lady, is discipline." I stared at her, my throat tight, my eyes burning. I would not cry. I would not give them the satisfaction. "That's not what happened," I whispered. "It is what happened," Ruth snapped. "What matters is your attitude. What matters is your disrespect. You will clean this up, every piece, and for the next month, you will be responsible for all household chores, dishes, dusting, the floors. Perhaps learning to serve this family will teach you some humility." "A month?" I said, incredulous. "He broke it." "That's discipline," Ruth said. The words were a verdict, a gavel strike. "It is not about the vase. It is about your defiant spirit. We are going to tame it. We are doing this because we love you." That was the mechanism. It was never a single voice. It was a three-part harmony of psychological control. Ruth was the authority, the loud, declarative voice that passed the sentence. She defined the official truth and delivered the punishment. Lydia was the strategist, the master of the implied. She never had to raise her voice. She laid the groundwork, twisted the narrative, and positioned me as the aggressor, the difficult one, the source of all tension. She manufactured the crime for Ruth to solve, and my father, Patrick, was the third, and perhaps most vital. Part, he was the strategic silence. He was in his study, just down the hall. He heard the crash. He heard the voices. He heard Ruth's pronouncement, and he did nothing. His inaction was his endorsement. His silence was his signature on their decree. By saying nothing, he told me their version of the truth was the only one he would acknowledge. He enabled them, he empowered them, and he abandoned me. The punishment was never symmetrical. That was the point. Cole, the perpetrator, was rewarded for honesty. I, the witness, was punished for defiance. It taught me the family's core lesson. The facts do not matter. Only the narrative matters. He who controls the narrative controls the family. And hanging on the wall, right above the spot where the vase had shattered, was a photograph. It was not a happy, smiling portrait. It was a candid shot from a family function years prior, taken by a professional photographer. In it, my father, Lydia, and Ruth were standing together, talking to a guest who was just out of frame. They were not smiling. They were listening. Their expressions composed, polite, and impenetrable. They were a wall. I was in the background, just a teenager, visible over my father's shoulder. I was looking at them, my face a mask of careful neutrality. The photograph had captured the essence of our family, a public-facing, united front, and me, on the outside, watching, unseen. It captured the impenetrable wall of silence that I was always trying to breach. For years after the vase incident, that phrase, "That's discipline," became the button. It was the word used to shut down any debate. When I questioned why Cole's college was paid for out of a family trust while I was told to apply for loans, "We are teaching you self-reliance. That's discipline." When I pointed out a discrepancy in the foundation's public reports, "You are not to question your father's business. That's discipline." It was the gag. It was the off switch for my brain, for my voice. It meant, we are in control. The facts are irrelevant. Your reality is not valid. Stop talking. I hadn't been back to that house in almost a year. The last time was for my father's birthday. A strained, 2-hour obligation. I had walked down that hallway, drawn to it like a crime scene, and I saw the photograph. It was still there, the united front, the silent wall, me, the ghost in the background. But something was wrong. The frame, a heavy, ornate giltwood, was crooked. It was only off by a degree, maybe 2. But in that house, a house of meticulous, oppressive order, it was a glaring error. Lydia would never have allowed it. The cleaning staff would have corrected it. It was a flaw in the facade. I stood there, looking at that slightly tilted picture. I took out my phone and took a photo of it. I don't know why. It just felt important. And then, standing in that hallway, the memory of the vase, the lie, the discipline came rushing back. I looked at the crooked frame, and the word from my grandfather's letter echoed in my head. Canyon at dusk, a painting, a frame. My grandfather's clue was not a metaphor. The family's entire structure was crooked, a perfect public image hiding a rotten, unbalanced core. This random, tilted frame was the universe screaming the answer at me. If this frame was crooked, what about that one? The one my grandfather had pointed me to, the one in my father's study. Check Canyon at dusk. He didn't mean look at the painting. He meant look behind it. My grandfather, the man who built this family, had seen the rot. He had seen the lies, and he had built an escape hatch, a hidden vault of truth, and left the key for the only person he knew would one day be desperate enough and smart enough to find it. I left the house 5 minutes later. My resolve was absolute. This was not a fight I could win by shouting. They were masters of that game. They could twist emotion and rewrite history in real time. I could never be louder than Ruth, more manipulative than Lydia, or more shatteringly silent than my father. But I was a financial investigator. I didn't deal in volume. I dealt in facts. I would not win by raising my voice. I would win by raising the truth. I would change the balance of power not with accusations, but with an audit. I would bring their entire crooked house of cards down, one verified, undeniable, documented fact at a time. The forensic report on the 2007 will came back from the RMSIB lab 48 hours later. Avery Sloan called me on a secure line. "It's good," Avery said. The words were flat, but they hit me like a jolt of electricity. Paper stock is a match for high-grade linen bond manufactured between 2005 and 2008. Ink is a chemical match for a specific Pelican fountain pen batch sold in 2007. The aging is natural. The ink has cracked correctly along the folds. The signature is, in our expert's opinion, indistinguishable from the verified control signature. This thing is real. Kane, your grandfather's will is legitimate. I let out a breath I had been holding for a week. So we file it. We stop the hearing. "No," Avery said. "We don't. This isn't a probate case anymore. A legitimate will was suppressed. A fraudulent one was entered into probate. That is a federal crime. Your family didn't just mismanage a fund. They stole an entire estate. This will is our foundation. Now we find out what they built on top of it. Your grandfather's letter mentioned the painting. My team has been digging into the fund's financials. I think we know why. This was my world. This was my language. Show me, I said. For the next 8 hours, I was not Jasmine Kane, the abandoned daughter. I was Jasmine Kane, lead financial investigator, seconded to the RMSIB task force. We were in a secure conference room at the federal building, the walls covered in whiteboards. The air smelled of stale coffee and dry erase markers. The Kane Urban Fund was supposed to be the public-facing entity, Avery explained, tapping a screen. It takes in donations. It makes donations. It files public tax documents. It's clean. Too clean, I said, tracing the outflow. The administrative costs are perfect. The charitable donations are exactly what they need to be to maintain their status. It's curated. Exactly. But the fund doesn't just hold cash. It holds assets. Specifically, it holds a controlling interest in 3 other companies. Avery wrote the names on the board. Blue Mesa Ventures, Ironleaf Properties, Sundial Civic Fund. I've never heard of them, I said. Nobody has. They're shell corporations, all registered in Delaware within 3 weeks of each other back in 2010. Registered agent. A firm in Wilmington that specializes in anonymity, nominee directors, untraceable. But we traced the funding. The seed money for all 3 didn't come from a bank. It came, in installments, from the Kane Urban Fund. They're washing the money, I said. The pattern emerging before my eyes. It was a classic, a triangular trade. A perfect one, Avery confirmed. They aren't just siphoning, they're investing. The fund invests in Blue Mesa Ventures. Blue Mesa then hires Ironleaf Properties for a development contract. Ironleaf, in turn, donates a portion of its fee back to the Sundial Civic Fund, a charity run by Aunt Ruth, but it gets better. Sundial then makes a tax-deductible grant back to the Kane Urban Fund, citing a shared community vision. The money moves in a perfect, self-cleaning loop. Each entity's books look clean on their own. You can't see the fraud unless you audit all three simultaneously. My blood ran cold. This was not simple greed. This was sophisticated, patient, long-term criminal enterprise. How much? That's the part we can't figure out. The books are sealed. But we found the trigger. We found 3 massive capital calls, one to each shell company, that started the entire cycle. Avery pulled up another file, 3 wire transfers, large ones. These 3 deals went through on the same day, October 9th, 2009. October 9th. I knew that date. I felt my stomach clench. That's the day my grandfather was first hospitalized, I said. That was the day of his first stroke. The one he recovered from. The one that put Lydia in charge of his medical power of attorney. Avery just looked at me. The very same day, the moment he was vulnerable, they moved. They had this structure built and waiting for the second he couldn't see the board. But a piece was missing. How did this connect to the will? How did it connect to the painting? We need inside their law firm, I said. The one that handled the probate. The one that filed the 2012 will. We're already working on it, Avery said. We've been looking for a weak link. We found a name. Nolan Brack, a legal assistant at the firm, worked closely with your father and Ruth. He was let go in early 2010, right after the shell companies were finalized. What happened to him? He vanished, moved out of his apartment, told his friends he was taking a job in Singapore. No one's heard from him since. He's a ghost. Not entirely. Avery's forensic tech team had been digging in the law firm's archived servers. They had a subpoena for the fund's records, which gave them a legal window. Brack was meticulous. He kept a private digital log, buried in a deleted partition. My tech found it last night. Most of it is boring, case notes, lunch orders, but then there's this, an entry from August 19th, 2009. Avery projected the text file onto the screen. It was a string of notes. Kane meeting re, V.K., estate planning, P.K., and R.E. insistent on new POA, L.K. controls medical access, V.K. asking for J. not being allowed, and then, the last line, V.K. mentioned his backup plan. Canyon at dusk, 1708, safe behind frame. My hands were gripping the edge of the table. 1708, August 17th. I didn't know the significance of the date. Maybe it was a code. It confirms your grandfather's note, Avery said. There is a safe. It's behind that painting. And Brack knew about it. He knew. And then he disappeared. We were close. We had the motive. We had the mechanism. And now we had confirmation of the target. But we still couldn't move. It's not enough for a search warrant, is it? I said, the frustration bitter in my mouth. A dead man's note, a disappeared assistant's log, and a theory about shell companies. A judge will never sign a warrant to raid Patrick Kane's private home on that. They'll call it a fishing expedition. You're right, Avery said. We need something physical, something current. We need proof that the safe is still relevant. We need a key, or a code, or an anonymous tip, I said, my email pulling up on my laptop. It had arrived while I was in the meeting, an email from a Proton address. No subject. Sent to my private work account. The body of the email contained 5 words. They forgot to change the safe's lock. I showed it to Avery. Avery stared at it. Who sent this? I have no idea, but it's the something current you were asking for. It helps, Avery said, but it's still hearsay. We need one more piece of physical evidence, something that ties the safe to your grandfather, not just to the house. I went home, my mind racing. Canyon at dusk, August 17th, 2007. The date of the will. The date of the frame. I tore my own digital archives apart. I had access to all my grandfather's old credit card statements, the ones from before Lydia took over. I searched for anything related to art, framing, or security. And at 2 a.m, I found it, a scanned PDF of an invoice from a high-end custom framing and security shop in Cherry Creek. The date, August 17th, 2007. The item, one custom frame and installation for Canyon at dusk, and in the itemized notes, installation of steel-backed security frame, integrated with wall, hidden hinges, custom combination lock. I emailed it to Avery with the subject line, physical evidence. But I kept digging. I was on fire. I went back to my own finances, my old investment accounts. There was a loose thread that had bothered me for years. In 2008, I had given my father $420,000. It was a windfall from an old tech investment, and he'd told me one of his smaller housing projects was struggling. He said he'd make me a partner. I was young, desperate for his approval. I sent the money. The project failed a year later, and my investment was wiped out. I was told it was just a bad beat. Now, I traced it. I had the wire confirmation from 2008. I tracked it to the holding company for the failed project, and then I watched, on my screen, as that holding company, 1 week later, transferred the exact same amount, $420,000, to a newly opened account. The name on the account, Blue Mesa Ventures. I felt the air leave my lungs. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They had used my own money to fund the very shell corporation they would use to do it. They had made me pay for my own betrayal. The final piece landed the next morning. Avery's team, armed with the new evidence, had gotten a broader subpoena for the fund's internal servers. They found the real books. "It's a work of art," Avery's forensic accountant told us, her voice filled with a kind of grudging respect. They didn't keep 2 sets of books. They kept one, but they built a parallel ledger inside the same file. She showed us, in the main spreadsheet, there was a column for community reinvestment. To any auditor, it looked like donations. But if you changed a single cell, a hidden macro ran. The community reinvestment column vanished, and a new one appeared. Sundial, Iron Leaf, Mesa transfers. It was all there, every dollar, every date, a perfect, detailed confession of the entire conspiracy, hidden in plain sight. Avery Sloan looked up from the screen. "We have the books, we have the will, we have the invoice for the safe, we have the anonymous tip." Avery closed the file. "We're going to get the warrant." The warrant was provisionally approved, contingent on a final judicial review. Avery Sloan was methodical. A warrant to search the home of Patrick Kane was a high-stakes move. It was politically sensitive. It had to be airtight, not just legally, but narratively. The financial data was the what, the will was the motive. Now, Avery needed the who and why from human sources. We needed a chorus of witnesses. Avery's team fanned out. They started with the invoice from the framing shop. The business was still there, though the owner had retired. They found him in Golden, a man with a steady hand and a perfect memory for his high-end work. He remembered the job. "Oh, yeah, the Kane house," he told the RMSIB agent, his deposition video clear and steady. "The old man, Victor, he came in himself, didn't send an assistant. He wanted a custom security frame, but he wanted it invisible. Hidden hinges, steel plate backing, custom lock. Most people want a keypad. He wanted an old-school combination dial. He was specific." The agent asked who set the code. "He did," the framer said. "Wrote it on a piece of paper and told me to set it and then burn the paper. I remember it. Odd code. May 17th. May 17th. 0517. My birthday. I watched the video in the federal building, and the room blurred for a moment. My grandfather had built a vault into his wall and set the combination to the day I was born. It was a message, sent across 6 years of silence. But the most important witness came from a quiet nursing home in Wheat Ridge. Her name was Evelyn Markham. She was 81 years old, sharp as a tack, and had been my grandfather's head housekeeper for 30 years. She retired, abruptly, 3 months after his funeral. Lydia had restructured the household staff. Avery and I went to see her together. She lived in a small, bright room filled with orchids. She looked at me, and her eyes, clear and blue, filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in a decade. "I wondered when you'd come," she said, her voice a soft, papery rustle. She looked at Avery. "You're the law." "I am, ma'am," Avery said gently. "We're investigating the management of the Kane estate." "It's about time," Evelyn said. She looked back at me. "He was so proud of you, child, that brain of yours. He said you were the only one who saw things as they were." "Evelyn," I said, my throat tight, "we need to ask you about a painting, Canyon at Dusk." Her smile was immediate. "Oh, yes, the big, gloomy one. He loved that thing, stared at it all the time, right at the end." She paused, her gaze turning inward, to a memory. "The night before he went to the hospital, that last time, he called me into the study. He was frail, but his eyes were clear. He pointed at the painting." "What did he say, Evelyn?" "If they put me in that hospital, and I don't come out," he said, "you move this. You put it in the guest wing. Tell them it's too dark for the study." I asked him why. He just smiled. He said, "The light in there is wrong. I want it somewhere safe, somewhere for the girl." He meant you, Jasmine. He always called you the girl. "Did you move it?" "I tried. After he passed, I told your father Mr. Victor's last wish was to move the painting. Your Aunt Ruth was there. She said it was sentimental nonsense and that your father's study was the proper place for it. She said, everything will remain as it is. She was already in charge." Avery leaned forward. "Ms. Markham, did you know what was behind the painting?" Evelyn's gaze met Avery's, sharp and direct. "Mr. Victor was a private man. He had his secrets, and I have mine." She reached over to the small side table by her chair and opened a drawer. From beneath a stack of lavender-scented handkerchiefs, she pulled out an object. It was a small, ornate, old-fashioned brass key, the kind for a small lockbox or a desk drawer. She held it out to me. "I found this on his desk, the morning after he went to the hospital," she said. "It was under his blotter, with a little tag. The tag just said, 'For the girl.' I knew what it was for. It's the override key for the combination dial, for the safe. He left it for you. I kept it. All these years. I was just waiting, child. Waiting for the right person to ask the right question." I took the key. It was heavy and cold. The next witness was not a warm memory. It was a ghost. Avery's team had been searching for any trace of Nolan Brack, the legal assistant who had disappeared. They found nothing, but they found a former roommate, a software developer who had been close to Nolan a decade ago. The agent's report was chilling. The roommate said Nolan had become paranoid, terrified of the Kane family's reach, and had left town with a duffel bag, paying for his bus ticket in cash. 2 days after the agent's visit, the roommate called Avery's office. He was trembling. "I have to meet you," he said. I can't hold on to this anymore. It's not right." He met Avery at a coffee shop and slid a small, black USB drive across the table. "Nolan gave this to me, the night he left. He said, 'If anything ever happens to me, or if you ever hear that the Kanes are in real trouble, you give this to the feds. Don't give it to the cops.' He was terrified. I just wanted to forget. But your agent, it's eating me alive. Just take it." It was an audio file, encrypted. Avery's tech team spent a day cracking it. The file was a digital statement, a dead man's switch. It was Nolan Brack's voice. We listened to it in the soundproof viewing room at the RMSIB. The audio was clean, his voice high and straining with fear. "I'm making this recording because I am afraid for my life." Nolan's voice crackled. "I'm being forced to do something I know is wrong. They're making me help them. After Mr. Kane's stroke, his daughter, Ruth. She and Patrick Kane. They're drafting a new power of attorney. It's not what he wanted. He's in and out. He's not capable. They're using his medical vulnerability against him. They're calling it family authority. But it's not. It's theft. I saw the original will. I know he left it all to the granddaughter, Jasmine. They're making me find a way to invalidate it. They're making me help. Oh, God. He broke down. Just a brief sob, quickly controlled. I'm being paid to go away. A lot of money. I'm taking it. I'm running. I just want this on the record. What they're doing. It's not right. The safe? Canyon at dusk. That's the key. That's where he kept the audio cut off. Avery shut it down. That's it. That's the conspiracy. That's the coercion. A terrified witness, on tape, attesting to the fraud in the safe. That's our warrant. The chorus grew. A part-time accountant who had worked, briefly, for Blue Mesa Ventures, came forward after seeing news of the hearing. He told Avery's team he'd quit because he was deeply uncomfortable. They made me sign an NDA thicker than a phone book, his statement read, and they were running 2 sets of ledgers, not on paper. It was conceptual, one for public and one for family. It felt dirty. An archivist from the county probate court, now retired, remembered Patrick and Ruth Kane coming in, just days after the funeral. They had a court order to retrieve some of Mr. Kane's older filings, he said. They left with a whole records box. I remember thinking it was strange. They seemed anxious. I never saw that box returned. We had it all: the financial web, the legitimate will, the motive of theft, the human witnesses, the key, the coerced legal assistant, the confirmation of the safe. The judge signed the search warrant. It was a no-knock warrant to be executed at dawn. Avery planned the raid with military precision. We're not going in blind, Avery said. I've had a team doing surveillance. Your father, Lydia, and Ruth attend a regional charity breakfast on the first Thursday of every month. They're keynote speakers. They'll be out of the house, on a stage, from 7 a.m. until at least 11. The raid was set for the next morning. That night, my phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. I answered. You're really doing this, the voice said. It was my cousin Cole. His voice wasn't booming now. It was thin, reedy. I'm doing what's right, I said. Right? He scoffed. You're destroying us. You're lighting a match to the whole family. You're burning the house down. Jasmine, for what? Money? I stood by my window. Looking down at the lights of the city, I felt a sudden, profound calm. The old fear, the old need for his approval, for any of them, was just gone. No, Cole, I said, my voice perfectly level. I'm not burning the house down. I'm turning on the lights. I hung up. The final piece of intel came in at 10 p.m. Just as I was getting ready to meet Avery for the final briefing, it was a text from Avery's inside source, a mole within the Kane legal team's administrative staff. It's happening. Raquel is panicking. She's been on the phone with the board all night, trying to gather new proxy votes to seize full control of the fund. She's trying to liquidate the shell companies. She knows something is coming. You have to move. Now. The clock was no longer ticking. It was about to explode. Avery moved the raid up. We weren't waiting for the breakfast. We were going in at dawn. Dawn does not break in the Denver foothills. It seeps. It was a cold, thin, gray light, 5:45 in the morning, when the RMSIB vehicles slid to a stop on the gravel driveway. Engines cut, doors opening with muffled clicks. I sat in the back of Avery's car, a witness, not an agent. I was legally required to be present for the execution of the warrant. As the claimant in the related civil case, the house looked like a fortress, sleeping and dark. Avery, flanked by 2 other RMSIB agents and a uniformed court marshal, did not knock. They used the doorbell, a long 3-second press that I knew was loud enough to wake the dead. We waited, The air was so still I could hear the flag on the lawn tick-tick-ticking in the breeze. The door opened. It was Lydia. She was not in a bathrobe. She was wearing tailored gray slacks and a silk shell, her hair perfectly in place. She was, as always, prepared. She looked at the agents, then at me, standing behind them on the steps. Her expression was not one of shock. It was one of profound, cold, theatrical disappointment. "Jasmine," she said, as if I had tracked mud onto her clean floor. "Ma'am," Avery said, stepping forward. "I am Agent Sloan with the Rocky Mountains Special Integrity Bureau. We have a lawfully executed warrant to search these premises." Avery held out the folded document. The court-martial stood beside them, hand resting near his side. "This is absurd," Lydia said, her voice perfectly modulated. "It's not yet 6 a.m. "We are authorized to enter," Avery stated. "Patrick!" Lydia called, stepping back, her hand fluttering to her throat in a practiced gesture of distress. My father appeared from the hallway. He was wearing an expensive cashmere robe, but he looked old. His face was puffy from sleep. His eyes panicked. He saw me, and his gaze hardened. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, finding his bluster. "You cannot just force your way in here. I am calling my lawyer." "You are welcome to do so, Mr. Kane," Avery said, stepping past Lydia into the grand foyer. The agents fanned out, one moving toward the kitchen, one toward the stairs. "This warrant is active. We are executing it. Any interference will be considered obstruction." My father pulled out his phone, his hand shaking with rage. "This is harassment. This is my private home." "Where is Ruth Kane?" Avery asked. "She is not here," Lydia said sharply. "She is at a conference. In Vale." Avery and I exchanged a look. A conference, or a bolt hole. She was liquidating. Running. We had been right to move. "Ms. Kane," Avery said to me, the professional tone snapping me back to the present. "You will be escorted by an agent at all times. Please direct us to the item specified in the warrant, the painting known as Canyon at Dusk." This was the moment. I walked past my father, who was now sputtering into his phone at his lawyer's voicemail. I walked past Lydia, who watched me with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying an insect. I led them through the house. The thick carpets muffled the sound of the agent's boots. I led them down the hall, past the crooked photograph that had started it all, and to the heavy oak doors of my grandfather's study. My father's study. Now. I pushed the door open. The room was dark. It smelled of old leather, my father's cigars, and something else. Stillness, stagnation. On the far wall, dominating the space above a cold fireplace, was the painting. It was massive, a dark, gaping wound of a canyon, rendered in brooding oils, and it was crooked, just like the photo in the hall. It was off by less than an inch, tilted to the left, a detail so small only a house this obsessively controlled would make it noticeable. It was the flaw. It was the sign. "That's it," I said. Avery nodded to the forensic agent, who wore gloves and carried a heavy case. "Document the scene first. Photos. Then we move it." Lydia and my father stood in the doorway, watching, flanked by the marshal. They were prisoners in their own home. "You cannot touch that," Lydia said, her voice straining. "That is an original. It is delicate." "We will be careful, ma'am," the agent said. He photographed the painting from every angle. He photographed the wall around it. Then, carefully, he and the other agent lifted the massive, heavy frame. It was attached by heavy-duty hooks. They eased it off the wall and set it gently, face first, against the carpet. Behind it, there was no wallpaper. There was a square, 12-inch section of flat, gray steel. In the center was a black, old-fashioned combination dial. Lydia made a sound, a small, choked gasp. My father was silent, his face as gray as the steel. The framer had been right. The anonymous tip had been right. Nolan Brack had been right. The forensic agent examined the dial. "There are scratches on the dial plate," he said, shining a small light. "Near the 0, and the hinges on the left side. Tool marks. Someone's tried to pry this. Recently. Ruth, she knew, or suspected, and she had tried to get in, but she didn't have the code. Agent Sloan, the text said. The dial is active. It's not disabled. Avery looked at me. Ms. Kane, the combination. From your affidavit. I stepped forward. My heart was a drum against my ribs. I looked at the dial. The code my grandfather told me, I said, my voice clear and loud in the silent room. Was my birthday. I knelt. The metal was cold. I put my fingers on the dial. Oh, 5, I said, turning it. 17. I spun the dial, clearing it. Then I began the combination. Right, past the 0, stopping on 5, left, past 5, stopping on 17, right, to the 0. There was a heavy, definitive, metallic click. The sound echoed in the room. It was the sound of a lock and a life, turning over. I pulled the small handle. The steel door swung open on silent, hidden hinges. Inside, the safe was small, barely 6 inches deep, lined with dark velvet. It was not full, but what was there was perfectly arranged. Avery knelt beside me. Agent, document. I want every item photographed in situ before we move it. There was a slim, leather-bound journal. There was a single, handwritten letter, folded in a heavy cream envelope, identical to the one I had received. There was a small, black USB drive, labeled, For Jasmine, Personal, in my grandfather's hand. There was a folded, official-looking document, a bank receipt. It was a certified cashier's check, dated 2007, for $1 million, used to endow the Jasmine Kane Integrity Scholarship at the University of Denver Law School, a program to be announced upon his death. It had never been announced, and in the back, a small dark blue velvet box. We have a storage device, Avery said. The agent moved in, photographing, tagging, bagging. He handed the USB to a tech agent, who produced a secure, air-gapped laptop. We screen all unknown media. Do it, Avery said. The agent inserted the drive. He ran his protocols. A moment later, he nodded. It's an audio file. Just one. Play it, Avery said. The agent pressed the key, and my grandfather's voice filled the study. It was weak, raspy, the voice of a man near the end. But it was him. It was him. This recording, his voice crackled, is my testament, my full estate, all assets, all holdings, are to pass to my granddaughter, Jasmine Kane, as outlined in my original 2007 will. She is the only one I trust. The only one. If you are hearing this, it means Patrick, or Ruth, or both, have defied my wishes. They have stolen what is not theirs. Anyone who obstructs this transfer, will be met with the full force of the law. Jasmine. Girl. I'm sorry I left you to fight them. I should have been stronger. His voice cut off. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at my father. He was holding onto the doorframe, his knuckles white. He was not looking at me. He was staring at the floor. A broken man. Lydia had her eyes closed. I was breathless. That's his voice, Avery said. That's our case. The agent handed me the other letter, the one in the cream envelope, now in an evidence bag. I opened it. It was short. Jasmine, it read. The will and the audio are your sword and shield. But she is a snake. If Ruth fights you, if she claims she had authority, she is lying. Check the power of attorney. Check the filing from February 9th, 2009. I revoked her. She knew it. February 9th, 2009. The day before the shell companies were funded, she had acted after he cut her off. She had been operating with zero authority. Just then, the sleek lawyer from the courthouse burst into the room, his hair mussed, briefcase in hand. This ends now, he shouted. I am ordering you to stop. This warrant was obtained under false pretenses. It's an illegal search. Everything you find is fruit of the poisoned tree. Avery Sloan stood up, slowly. Counselor, Avery said. "You are welcome to file your motion. But right now, you are interfering with a federal warrant. The court-martial will remove you." The marshal stepped forward. The lawyer's face went purple, but he deflated. He had no power here, not anymore. The forensic agent was logging the last item, the small velvet box. He opened it. Inside, resting on satin, was the Kane signet ring. The heavy gold ring my grandfather had worn every day of his life, the symbol of the head of the family. Avery looked at me, then at the ring, then back to the stunned, silent lawyer. "Scene is secure," Avery said. "Bag the contents. We are sealing this room. We're done here." As they worked, my gaze drifted to my father's desk. It was cluttered, unlike the rest of the house, and there, in a silver frame, was a picture of me. It was old, from when I was in college. Before the worst of it, I was smiling, squinting into the sun. I had forgotten it existed. At the bottom, in the white margin of the photo, my grandfather had written something in his sharp, slanted hand, a note I had never seen. I leaned closer to read it. "You kept your eyes unafraid of the dark. Don't stop." The raid was an earthquake. The media response was the aftershock, a deafening roar designed to bury me in the rubble. The Kane family's public relations machine, silent during the initial hearing, activated with terrifying, coordinated force. The morning after the search, the Denver Post front page was a gut punch. The headline, above a flattering, soft-focus photo of my father and Lydia at a charity ball, read, "Kane legacy attacked. Unstable daughter's vendetta tears family apart." The article was a masterpiece of character assassination. Sources close to the families, it read, describe Jasmine Kane, 34, as a troubled and disruptive individual, long estranged from her relatives. Friends of Patrick and Lydia Kane expressed deep concern for the couple, who have endured this private tragedy with their characteristic dignity. It was Ruth's voice, channeled through a paid publicist. Every word was chosen to paint me as erratic, greedy, and mentally unwell. The local talk shows followed suit. I watched, numb, from Avery's temporary office as a panel of community leaders discussed the case. Lydia Kane is a matriarch in this city. One woman, a socialite I'd seen at a dozen dry fundraisers, said, clasping her hands, "She has done nothing but good. She took in her husband's child and gave her a life of privilege. This is how she is repaid? It's a disgrace." "And let's not forget Ruth Kane," the host added. "Ruth has been a pillar of the community, tirelessly working for the Sundial Civic Fund. This entire investigation, it feels personal, vindictive. It just smells wrong." My name was Mud. My character was being drawn and quartered in the public square. They were using the same script they had used on me for 20 years. "You are difficult. You are unstable. Your reality is wrong." Avery Sloan walked in, holding a coffee, and glanced at the television. "Turn it off. Kane, that's just noise. It's what they do when they're losing." "They're winning," I said, my voice hoarse. "They're controlling the narrative." "No," Avery said, placing the coffee on the table. "They're reacting to the narrative. We have the evidence. We're in control." That afternoon, Avery Sloan, representing the RMSIB, held a press conference. It was the first official word from the federal side. The room was a circus of cameras. Avery stepped to the podium, looking severe and unbothered. "We are not here to try this case in the media," Avery began, the voice sharp and clear. "The High Plains Integrity Court has reviewed the evidence recovered under a lawful warrant. The contents of that warrant are now part of the public record." A reporter shouted, "Mrs. Kane's lawyers are calling this a witch hunt. What's your response?" Avery didn't blink. "We are a Bureau of Financial Integrity, not politics. We follow the data. We follow the money. The Kane family has built a reputation on their name. We are simply ensuring their books match that reputation. Can you confirm the discovery of a new will? Or the audio recording?" Avery's face was stone. "All I will say is this. The evidence will speak for itself. and it is speaking very, very loudly. The next day, the first crack appeared in their public wall. Avery's team, armed with the warrant's findings, had filed a motion to unseal the records of the failed housing project, the one I had invested in. The motion included 3 sworn affidavits. They were from 3 former Kane Holdings employees, all of them mid-level managers who had left the company around 2009. Each affidavit told the same story. "I was present in the meeting," one read. "When Patrick Kane announced that the project was short on capital, we thought we were going to miss payroll. The next day, Mr. Kane told us his daughter, Jasmine, had stepped up and saved the project. Her injection of $420,000 was the only reason we survived the quarter." Another affidavit confirmed the money's destination. That money never went to the subcontractors. It was wired out, 2 days later, to an LLC I'd never heard of, Blue Mesa Ventures. When I asked about it, I was told it was a restructuring and that my services were no longer required. The story changed. Instantly, I was not a greedy daughter trying to steal a fortune. I was an investor trying to recover a stolen debt. A new headline appeared on a financial blog. "The Kane Loan. Did Jasmine Kane fund her own disinheritance?" Then the independent auditor's preliminary report, commissioned by the RMSIB, was leaked. It was dense, technical, but the conclusion was a single, devastating bullet point. Significant indicators of data manipulation, including the use of hidden macros and parallel ledgers, designed to obscure the final destination of transferred assets, the 2-tier bookkeeping system, the family column. It was real. The public narrative was tilting. The talk shows were less certain. "This is complex," one host now said, frowning. There seemed to be 2 very different stories emerging. The Kane family, sensing the shift, panicked. They made a mistake. They deployed their secret weapon, my father. He had never given a media interview in his life. He agreed to an exclusive with a friendly local news anchor. It was a disaster. He was stiff, evasive, and fell back on the only script he knew. "My daughter, she is not well," he said, his hands clasped. We have always tried to protect her." The anchor, sensing weakness, pressed him. "Mr. Kane, did she, or did she not, invest $420,000 in 2008? My father froze. He looked at Lydia, who was just off camera. He stammered. That was a family matter, a gift. We are a traditional family." "So it did happen?" He couldn't answer. The lie was too big, the facts too solid. But the real blow came from an unexpected source. Cole, arrogant, stupid Cole. He was furious that his place in the line of succession was threatened. He did what his generation did. He went online. He started a live stream to tell his side of the story. He sat in his expensive car, sunglasses on, phone held up to his face. "This is all it's just insane. You guys," he blustered, to an audience of a few hundred people. "Jasmine is lying. She's always been jealous of me. She's jealous of my mom. She's not even a real Kane, you know?" He was rambling, preening, enjoying the attention. A comment popped up. "What about the safe? The news said they found a safe." Cole laughed. It was a high-pitched, nervous sound. "The safe? Oh, man, that's the craziest part. She's acting like she found some big secret, like that safe. Everyone knew about that safe. It was my grandpa's. He put her birthday in as the code, as a joke, like, 0517. He told me that he thought it was funny. It was a joke. It had, like, old papers in it. It was nothing. She's trying she's just..." He kept talking, but I had stopped listening. My fingers were frozen. He said the code. He had just, on a public live stream, admitted to knowing about the safe, admitted to knowing the code. He had not only confirmed the safe's existence, he had placed himself in the inner circle of knowledge. He was an accessory. He knew the safe existed, and he knew it was set to my birthday. And he had remained silent for 6 years while a fraudulent will was executed. He had just destroyed himself. I didn't hesitate. I screen-recorded the video. I saved the file. I attached it to a new email. To Avery Sloan, RMSIB. Subject: Cole Kane. Body: You need to see this. I hit send. It was cold. It was clean. It was, as my aunt would say, discipline. By the next morning, the world had changed. The story was no longer greedy daughter versus noble family. The narrative was now Kane whistleblower uncovers decades of fraud. The shift was total. The doubt had vanished, replaced by a hungry, furious curiosity. The media, which had been attacking me, was now my ally. They were digging. They found an old archived video from a 2005 stockholders meeting. My grandfather was at the podium. "People ask me about legacy," he said, his voice booming, full of life. "Legacy isn't about giving your children what they want. It's about giving them what they've earned. I don't want an heir who nods. I want an heir who thinks. The person who is worthy of this company, of this family, is the child who knows when to say no, even when yes is easier." The camera panned, just for a second, to the front row. I was there, 23 years old, watching him, beside me. Cole was looking down, texting on his phone. That night, I came home to my apartment, exhausted. The day had been a blur of legal calls, of watching the empire my family had built on lies begin to crumble. And on my doormat, just as before, was a single envelope. It was not gray. It was a plain white, legal-sized envelope, no stamp, no name. I picked it up, my heart pounding. Inside was a single document. It was a photocopy, but a clean one. It was a power of attorney, filed with the county clerk. At the top, it listed Ruth Kane as the appointee. At the bottom, it was signed by my grandfather, Victor Kane, and in the middle, in huge, clear, stamped letters from the clerk's office, was a single word: revoked. The date of the revocation, stamped and initialed by a county clerk. February 9th, 2009. The day before she had started funding the shell companies, the final, non-digital, irrefutable proof. My grandfather's ghost, and his unknown helper, had just handed me the bullet for the gun. The High Plains Integrity Court was not a courtroom. It was an operating theater, and the hearing had resumed with the stark, cold light of an impending incision. The gallery was packed, a wall of silent press and staring, curious faces. My father, Lydia, and Cole sat at the defense table, surrounded by a new, more expensive team of lawyers. Ruth was still conspicuously absent, receiving treatment for exhaustion at a private clinic in Vail, a legal fiction we all understood. The family's lead counsel, a shark from a downtown firm, was on his feet before the judge had even taken her seat. His voice was a booming performance of indignation. "Your Honor, before we proceed, the defense must, in the strongest possible terms, move to suppress all evidence recovered from the Kane residence. The warrant," he said, sneering the word, "was obtained under false pretenses. It was based on the vindictive, uncorroborated claims of an estranged family member and a digital note from a long-dead man. It was an illegal search, a fishing expedition. Everything found, the safe, the contents, is fruit of the poison tree and must be excluded." The judge looked at him over the rim of her glasses, her expression bored. "Counselor, the warrant was not based on uncorroborated claims. It was based on a 200-page affidavit detailing forensic financial analysis, conflicting public filings, and sworn testimony, which suggested a multi-million-dollar fraud. The digital note merely corroborated what the financials already screamed. The warrant was valid. The search was legal. Your motion is denied." The lawyer looked like he had been slapped. "But, Your Honor—" "Sit down, counselor, or the marshal will help you." He sat. The sound of his briefcase snapping shut echoed in the silence. Avery Sloane stood, their movements precise, economical. Your Honor, the Rocky Mountains Special Integrity Bureau will now demonstrate the architecture of the fraud. The large monitors in the courtroom, dark until now, flickered to life. A complex flowchart appeared. On one side, the Kane Urban Fund. On the other, the three shell companies, Blue Mesa Ventures, Ironleaf Properties, Sundial Civic Fund. The defense has claimed these entities were legitimate, separate investments, Avery said, using a laser pointer. We will now show you the timeline. A new column of data appeared on the screen. It was a list of dates. These, Avery said, the red dot landing on the first transfer, are the three initial, massive capital wire transfers that funded the shell corporations, and these, the red dot moved to the new column, are the hospital admission records for Victor Kane, October 9th, 2009, the day of his first, debilitating stroke. The moment Mr. Kane was medically vulnerable, the very day he was placed under the care of Lydia Kane. This complex network of theft, which had been built and lay dormant, activated. The fraud began the literal hour he was incapacitated. The lawyer objected. Speculation. It is a timeline, counselor, the judge snapped. Facts, overruled. But, Avery continued, the family's actions to conceal the estate began even earlier. They claim the study, the location of the safe, was untouched, a memorial. We will now hear from Evelyn Markham, Mr. Kane's housekeeper of 30 years. Evelyn's face filled the screen, her video deposition clear and steady. She was 81, in her nursing home room, but her eyes were sharp. He called me in, she said, her voice soft but resolute. The night before he went to the hospital, that last time, he pointed to the painting, the canyon at dusk. He said, "If they put me in that hospital, and I don't come out, you move this. You tell them it's too dark for the study." I asked him why. He just smiled. He said, "I want it somewhere safe, somewhere for the girl." He meant Jasmine. He always called her the girl. I saw Lydia, at the defense table, flinch. It was a small, almost invisible tightening of her jaw. "Now," Avery said, "we move to the dueling wills." Two documents appeared side by side. The first, the 2007 will, recovered from the gray envelope. The second, the 2012 will, the one that had been entered into probate, the one that created the fund and disinherited me. We submitted both to a court-appointed forensic document examiner. We have their sworn audio deposition. A clinical detached voice filled the room. Document A, dated 2007, is a definitive match to all known. Verified control signatures of Victor Kane, the ink, paper stock, and natural aging are all consistent with the purported date. It is authentic. A pause. Document B, dated 2012, the voice continued, is not. The signature shows significant tremor, which is inconsistent with other documents signed by Mr. Kane in that period. It shows signs of assisted signing or a guided hand. Furthermore, the fundamental letter formations, the flying K and the open A, are not present. In my expert opinion, the signature on document B is not a valid, freely executed signature of Victor Kane, a forgery. The will that had structured their lives for 6 years was a fake. The defense was reeling. Avery pressed the advantage, calling the next witness. The prosecution calls Cole Kane. Cole looked ill. He shuffled to the stand, his expensive suit looking 2 sizes too big. He swore the oath, his voice barely a whisper. Avery approached him, their voice almost kind. "Mr. Kane, you are a beneficiary of the Sundial Civic Fund, are you not?" "Yes." "And you have been present for the testimony about a safe hidden behind a painting?" "Yes." "Tell the court, Mr. Kane, before the RMSIB raid, had you ever heard of this safe?" Cole licked his lips. He looked at his mother, Lydia. He looked at his lawyer. "No," he said, his voice cracking. "No, never. I knew nothing about it. Avery nodded, as if expecting this. You knew nothing about it? Under oath. Permission to play a video exhibit, Your Honor. The judge nodded. The monitor flashed to a new image. It was Cole, in his car, sunglasses on, preening into his phone. It was the live stream. His own arrogant voice filled the court. That safe? Oh man, that's the craziest part. Everyone knew about that safe. It was my grandpa's. He put her birthday in as the code, as a joke, like, oh, 517. He told me that. He thought it was funny. Avery stopped the video. The courtroom was a vacuum of silence. Cole had gone white. Mr. Kane, Avery said, all kindness gone, replaced by surgical steel. You have just testified, under oath, that you knew nothing about the safe, and yet here you are, on a public live stream, boasting that everyone knew, boasting that you personally knew the combination, my client's birthday, 517. Were you lying to your social media followers, Mr. Kane? Or are you lying to this court, right now, under penalty of perjury? Cole was hyperventilating. I misspoke. I was just talking. It was just... You were just talking, Avery finished for him. About a hidden safe, with a combination you knew, while your family was actively probating a fraudulent will to disinherit the one person whose birthday opened that safe. Thank you. No further questions. Cole stumbled from the stand. My father closed his eyes. The family lawyer, desperate, tried a new line of attack on cross-examination. He focused on me. Ms. Kane, he sneered. This is quite a performance, but isn't this all just a desperate attempt at a payday? Isn't it true your personal finances are a mess? No, I said. That you're drowning in debt, and you see your family as a lifeline? Objection, Avery said. Relevance. It goes to motive. Your Honor, the lawyer shouted. Fine, the judge said, looking annoyed. I'll allow it. Ms. Kane, are you financially unstable? Before I could answer, Avery stood. Your Honor, since the defense has so kindly opened the door on my client's finances, we would like to submit this into evidence. A new document flashed on the screen. It was a certified bank receipt. This, Avery said, is a wire transfer confirmation for $420,000 from Ms. Kane to Kane Holdings, dated 2008. Avery turned to the stunned lawyer. My client wasn't financially desperate. She was a creditor. She was, in fact, the first investor in the failed project that, our records show, was used to funnel that exact amount, $420,000, into the Blue Mesa Ventures Shell Corporation. She wasn't trying to rob the piggy bank. Counselor, she was trying to get back the money she put in, the money they used to fund their own conspiracy. The lawyer sat down, defeated. Avery now held the room. The prosecution has 2 final audio exhibits. Your Honor, a new file was opened. The first, Avery said, is the audio file recovered from the USB drive, found inside the family safe. Avery pressed play. My grandfather's voice, raspy, weak, but filled with a cold fury, echoed through the room. My testament, my full estate, all assets, to my granddaughter, Jasmine Kane. She is the only one I trust. If you are hearing this, it means Patrick, or Ruth, have defied my wishes. They have stolen what is not theirs. Anyone who obstructs this will be met with the full force of the law. The room was frozen. My father was weeping, his shoulders shaking in silent sobs. The second, Avery said, is the final audio statement of Nolan Brack, the legal assistant who disappeared in 2010. Nolan's terrified, high-pitched voice filled the void. I'm afraid for my life. They're making me. Ruth, she and Patrick. They're drafting a new POA. He's not capable. They're calling it family authority, but it's not. It's theft. I saw the original will. He left it all to the granddaughter. Oh, God. The audio clicked off. The two voices hung in the air, the victim and the coerced witness. The defense, Avery said, their voice dropping, will no doubt argue that Ruth Kane, at least, acted in good faith, that she believed she had the authority. A document appeared on the screen, the 2009 Power of Attorney. This, Avery said, is the authority she claimed, but the defense failed to note a subsequent filing. The screen split. Beside the POA, a new document appeared, the one I had received in the mail, stamped in huge, red letters, revoked. This is the revocation, filed with the county clerk on February 9th, 2009, the day before Ruth Kane funded the shell companies. She knew. She had no authority. Every transfer, every signature, was an independent criminal act. And one final detail. Your Honor, the anonymous email tip, the one that told my client, they forgot to change the safe's lock. The defense has dismissed it as a ghost. Avery looked at the defense table. It wasn't. Our forensic team traced the origin. It was sent from a pay terminal at a public library. The user paid for 15 minutes of computer time with a credit card, the credit card belonging to Ruth Kane. The room erupted. We can only speculate why, Avery concluded, their voice cutting through the noise. Perhaps, having failed to pry the safe open herself, she hoped I would, and that she could have the contents thrown out, the fruit of the poison tree motion her lawyers led with today. It doesn't matter. Avery turned and looked at me, then at the judge. The darkness has been brought to light. The RMSIB rests. The judge called a 48-hour recess for the defense to consider its position in light of the new evidence. It was a judicial order to surrender. We met in a sterile conference room at the courthouse. Me, Avery, and the entire phalanx of the Kane family legal team. My father and Lydia were there. Ruth was not. Their lead lawyer, the shark, was gone. In his place was a quieter, older man who looked like he specialized in cleaning up tragedies. He slid a folder across the table. Ms. Kane, he began, his voice a polished, mournful baritone. My clients are prepared to offer a significant settlement. We propose a 3-part resolution. First, the 2012 will is withdrawn. Second, you are ceded full control of the Kane Urban Fund. Third, a substantial 7-figure payment is made to you personally in compensation for the administrative oversights. He smiled. A thin, papery expression. It was the old script. Pay the girl off. Make the problem go away. Manage the narrative. I looked at Avery, who remained impassive. Then I looked at the lawyer. No, I said. The lawyer's smile twitched. I beg your pardon? No settlement. There is nothing to settle. I leaned forward, and the room seemed to shrink. This isn't a negotiation. The 2007 will, which your predecessors allowed to be buried, is the only legal document. It is not a 3-part resolution. It is a 1-part fact. The estate is mine. The fund is mine. Everything is mine. This hearing is not a negotiation. It is a notification. Ms. Kane, be reasonable, the lawyer started. I am a financial investigator. I cut him off, my voice cold and flat. I am being exquisitely reasonable. You are offering to give me a piece of what is already mine. The answer is no. The room was silent. Avery looked down at a pad, hiding a ghost of a smile. My father, who had been staring at his hands, suddenly stood up. His lawyers looked startled. Jasmine, he said, his voice thick. Can I speak to you? Alone? For 1 minute, his lawyer started to object. Patrick, I advise, be quiet, my father said. It was the first time I had ever heard him use that tone. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Please, as your father. Avery looked at me. I gave a small nod. The hall, I said. We stepped outside, into the marble corridor. The air was cold. We stood 10 feet apart. He wouldn't look at me, not at first. He stared at a crack in the marble. "You have to understand," he whispered. I thought I was protecting the family. The old excuse, the lifelong shield. I thought if I just stayed quiet, if I let Lydia and Ruth handle the details, it would all smooth over. I thought the silence would keep us together, keep the name clean. "The name," I said. It wasn't a question. "All those years, when you were a girl, when you and Lydia, when Ruth said you were being difficult, I heard it all." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I heard the shouting," he said. "I heard the accusations. I was in my study. I heard her break that vase. I heard you cry. And I thought, if I came out, I would have to choose. And if I chose, the family would break. So I did nothing. I chose silence. I thought it was a protection." I looked at this man, my father, and for the first time, I did not feel anger. I felt nothing. I felt the cold, empty, echoing space where a father should have been. "Your silence wasn't a shield." "Dad," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut. "Your silence was a weapon. It was your permission. It was your signature on every lie they told. It didn't protect the family. It only protected the people with power." He flinched, as if I had hit him. "It protected you," I continued, "from having to be a father. It protected Lydia from consequences. It protected Ruth from accountability. And it left me alone, in a house full of people, to take the fall. Your silence was the most violent thing you ever did." He finally looked at me. He had no answer. There was no answer. "Is that all?" I asked. He just stared, a hollow man. I turned and walked back into the conference room. Lydia was watching the door as I entered. Her face was a mask of perfect, neutral composure. "Is he all right?" she asked, her voice soft. "He'll live," I said, sitting down. She looked at me, and for a fraction of a second, the mask cracked. I saw the woman underneath, not a monster, just a weak, terrified, deeply ambitious woman. "I want you to know," she said, her voice just for me. I did not know the extent of it. I knew about the revocation, the 2009 paper. Ruth told me it was procedural, that she was handling it. "But you knew," I said. "I knew," she admitted, "but I did not know about the shell companies. I did not know she was moving that much money. I did not know about the forged will. You have to believe me." "Why should I?" "Because," she said, "I am many things. Jasmine, but I am not stupid. What she did, it was reckless. It was vulgar. She was going to burn us all down. I never would have been that sloppy." It was the most honest and the most horrifying thing she had ever said to me. She was confessing, not to a crime, but to a lapse in her partner's judgment. As if summoned, the door to the conference room opened, and there was Ruth. She was not in a hospital gown. She was in a severe dark blue suit. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She looked like a bird of prey. She was not flanked by lawyers. She was alone. "You cannot be in here," her own lawyer said, standing, frantic. "Sit down," Ruth snapped. "You're fired." She walked directly to the table and stood, facing me. She looked at my father, her lip curling in a sneer. She looked at Lydia, with pure contempt. Then she looked at me. "You," she said. "This is an official proceeding," Avery said, standing. "If you wish to make a statement, you will do so on the record. We will not be having a private conversation." "I don't care about the record," Ruth said. She looked at Avery. "You are just a tool. I want to talk to her." "Anything you say will be in this room, in front of all parties," Avery said, their voice unyielding. Ruth stared at Avery. A long, calculated silence. Finally, she nodded. "Fine. You want a show? You'll have one." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single, battered envelope. It was cream-colored, just like the others, my grandfather's stationery. She threw it on the table. It slid to a stop in front of me. It was addressed, in his slanted hand, to Ruth. "Go on," she said, her voice a low hiss. "Read it. Read your sainted grandfather's real opinion." I didn't touch it. Avery, wearing gloves, picked it up, slid it open, and slid the letter out. Avery read it first, then handed it to me. It was dated 2003, years before all of it. "Ruth," it began, "I know you have ambitions. I know you see this family as a machine, and you want to be at the controls. I am warning you, now, as your brother, your jealousy of Patrick, of his life, of his wife, and even of his child, is a sickness. You are confusing your resentment for strength. You are confusing control for leadership. If you ever use your position to harm this family, to harm that child, I will see you ruined. I will not have my legacy turned into a monument for your petty, small-toothed ambition. I am warning you. Do not test me." It was signed, Victor. My head came up. I looked at her. Her face was white with a fury so old it was almost archaeological. "His wife?" I said. "My mother," Ruth laughed. A terrible, dry sound. "Your mother, the perfect one, the one he loved, the one he wanted Patrick to marry. She got everything. She got the name. She got the money. And I was the one who did the work. I was the one who built the foundations. I was the one who held it all together when she was ill, and even in death. She won. He gave her child. You, everything he had promised me." The motive. It was not just greed. It was a lifetime of perceived injustice. It was a dark, festering, 40-year-old jealousy. She had not been stealing from me. She had been taking what she truly, pathologically, believed was hers. "You did this," I whispered. "Because of my mother?" "I did this," she said. "For me. And I would have gotten away with it, if not for this sentimental, theatrical nonsense from a dead man." Avery Sloane cleared their throat. "Thank you for your confession. Ms. Kane, we will be submitting this letter, and your testimony, to the court." Ruth just smiled. "Do it. It doesn't matter. You think this is an end? This is just a transfer of power." My father, who had been silent, finally spoke. He looked at his lawyers. "She is no longer my sister. She is not part of this family. Open the books. Open all of them. Give them everything." Lydia stood. She pushed her chair in. She looked at me, and her face was— I had no word for it. It was not remorse. It was acceptance. "I'm sorry," she said. It was not an apology. It was an admission. "I'm sorry this happened. I'm sorry we were caught." She turned and walked out of the room. My father followed her. Cole had already left. I hadn't even noticed. He had just evaporated. I saw his phone on the chair where he'd been sitting. The screen was lit. It was a calendar reminder. Therapy appointment, 4 p.m. A small, impossible crack in the facade. A sign that the old pattern, the one that had broken him, was maybe, just maybe, starting to break. Avery submitted the letter. The judge accepted it. It was over. The fight was over. The courtroom, when we returned, was no longer a theater. It was a place of judgment. The air was thin, the silence absolute. The judge entered, took her seat, and looked at the assembled parties. My father was present, as was Lydia. Cole and Ruth were absent. Their lawyers sat, shuffling papers, their faces grim. The judge did not waste time. Her voice was a hammer, but a clean one, shaping a new reality. After a thorough review of the evidence presented, including the forensic validation of the 2007 will, the audio testimony of the deceased, the verified financial records, and the corroborating witness statements, this court makes the following findings. She looked directly at my father. The will dated 2012, having been entered into probate based on a signature obtained under duress or forgery, is hereby ruled invalid and void. She looked at me. The will dated March 4th, 2007, is ruled to be the true final and binding last will and testament of Victor Kane, A gavel struck. It was a single, sharp crack of wood. Accordingly, she continued, this court orders the immediate, unconditional transfer of all assets, holdings, properties, and titles specified within the 2007 will to its sole and rightful beneficiary, Ms. Jasmine Kane. It was done. In one sentence, the entire crooked architecture of my family was demolished and rebuilt, founded on the rock of my grandfather's true words. Furthermore, the judge said, her gaze hardening, the evidence of conspiracy to commit probate fraud, abuse of power of attorney, and systematic forgery is substantial. This court is transferring the complete file to the State Attorney General's office for criminal review. This is no longer just a family matter. This is a matter of law. Who is culpable will be determined by a jury of their peers. This court will not engage in a blanket condemnation. Those who are innocent will be cleared. Those who are guilty will be held responsible for their specific, individual actions. She looked at the lawyers. All shell companies, including but not limited to Blue Mesa Ventures, Iron Leaf Properties, and the Sundial Civic Fund, are to be immediately dissolved, their assets frozen and transferred to the primary estate. Pending a full audit, the community projects currently funded by the Kane Urban Fund will be preserved. They will be folded into a new entity. She looked at her notes. The Victor Integrity Fund, to be administered by Ms. Kane. The legal battle was over. The personal one was just beginning. That evening, I did not go home. I went to the house, my house. I walked into the study, now mine, and stood before the empty space on the wall where Canyon at Dusk had hung. The RMSIB had taken it as evidence. On the desk, in an evidence bag, was the small velvet box from the safe. I had signed for it. I opened it. The signet ring sat inside, heavy and cold. The symbol of the Kane family. I picked it up. It was a burden, a crown, a lifetime of expectation and betrayal, all in one small circle of gold. I placed it on the desk. I did not want it. It represented the silence, the power, the secrets, the discipline that had nearly destroyed me. Then I thought of my grandfather's voice. She is the only one I trust. I thought of the scholarship he had created in my name, the one I had just learned about, the Jasmine Kane Integrity Scholarship. I picked the ring back up. I slid it onto my finger. It was not a crown. I realized it was not a prize. It was a tool. It was a reminder. It was a responsibility. It was a promise to my grandfather that I would not let the name he built be synonymous with the rot they had introduced. My first act as head of the estate was not a corporate one. It was a phone call to the University of Denver. The next day, the papers announced the formation of a new scholarship. I renamed it the Canyon Scholarship. It was a $1 million endowment, just as my grandfather had planned, for students of law and forensic finance. Its charter specified its preference, to be awarded to students who had demonstrated courage, who had spoken up, who had chosen no when yes was easier. It was a fund for those who had been pressured to be silent. My second act was to call a full, independent, external audit of every single Kane holding. Patrick Kane resigned from the board of directors. He signed the papers without a word. Lydia Kane resigned from all her community and charity boards. The audit, I'd made clear, would be public. Her reign as the city's matriarch was over, not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastatingly polite resignation. Ruth's lawyers, the new ones, the expensive criminal defense team, tried to negotiate. They called Avery. They offered a plea. She will admit to undue influence if the state drops the forgery and fraud charges. Avery called me. What do you want to do? I thought about it. I thought about the years of being belittled. I thought about the way she had tried to break me. I thought about her, standing in that conference room, consumed by a 40-year-old hatred. Tell them no, I said. This isn't about a deal. I need justice, not humiliation. Ruth Kane was indicted on 3 felony counts. She would face a jury. The ripples spread. I got a postcard from Pueblo. A few weeks later, it was blank, but the picture was of a new, low-income housing complex being framed. I knew Cole was there. He had traded his social media stream for a hammer, joining a program to build houses. He was, for the first time in his life, building something real instead of just living in something fake. I called my new financial manager. I set up an anonymous donation to that specific Pueblo project, large enough to fund their next 3 builds. The transition took months. I lived in the archives, in the spreadsheets. I was undoing a decade of lies, one ledger entry at a time. When it was finally done, when the last account was balanced, I stood on the courthouse steps. The press, who had once savaged me, was now my audience. A reporter, the same one who had first called me unstable, shouted the last question. "Ms. Kane, after all this, was it worth it? Was this all just revenge?" I looked at him. I thought about the gray envelope, the one that had felt like a beast, waiting. I thought about my grandfather's desperate, slanted handwriting. "No," I said, my voice clear in the cold air. This was not revenge. This was about giving a letter back its name. My work was done, but it was also just beginning. That night, I was the last one to leave the new offices of the Victor Integrity Fund. I walked through the building, turning off the lights. In my own office, I had hung the painting. Canyon at Dusk. The frame was repaired. The canvas, now a symbol of truth, not secrets, drank the last of the evening light. I went to the archive room, the massive climate-controlled vault where all the real records, the 2007 will, my grandfather's journals, were now stored. I locked the heavy steel door. As I walked down the long, silent main corridor, I saw one light was still on, a small, simple sconce in the hallway, the kind of light that is left on for security, for comfort, the kind of light that is meant to keep the dark from settling in. I looked at it. I could have turned it off. I left it on. The mission of integrity was just getting started, and in this house, we would no longer be afraid of the dark. But we would not be leaving a single corner unlit. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are all tuning in from. Please drop a comment below. Let me know where you're from, and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it a little extra support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.